Today, we're going to talk about how to track leads in Google Analytics using goals. Now, this is a getting started topic. And remember, every workshop, we have these main sort of categories. So we have getting started, which is for the beginning implementation. So those of you just starting out, this is going to be a really good one for you. We have a beyond the basics, which will actually be next week. And that's for those who are a little bit more advanced and want to learn some of the more cool things that are out there. We'll talk about some more advanced stuff. We have strategy sessions. So for those of you who are not doing implementation at all, but you're really more concerned around, how do I use all this data and what questions should I be asking? Those are the strategy sessions. And then we have the updates, which is at least once a month. We typically do that around the beginning of every month. And that covers you on the updates. So we actually just did that last week and had some really, really important ones in there for GDPR. So if you are concerned about GDPR, that might be a definite one to check out. It is already in the workshop for those of you who are Academy members. My name is Chris Mercer. I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io, and you can see our content featured on Digital Marketer, Conversion Excel, Social Media Examiner, Seriously Simple Marketing, and others around the internet. Remember, there are 5 pillars of measurement marketing that we talk about through all of these. The first is planning, really asking around which questions should you be asking, what are the answers, what are you going to do with those answers, how are you going to make sure those questions can answer you, what data they need, all that sort of stuff. Then there's the actual build out, which we'll be talking about today. This is in terms of goal setting and setting goals in Google Analytics, building out all of the measurements, making sure they're tracking properly. Then you've got the reports where you actually build out the reports. That's ideally what's going to give you all of these answers that you were thinking about in that planning stage. Then there's the forecasting, which is what you do with these answers. You start getting benchmarks, and then you can sort of predict what your near future is going to look like. And then ultimately optimizing, which is the steering wheel, right? It lets you know what's broken and what's not, what's underperforming, what's overperforming. And based on all that, that helps you give a direction as far as what you need to do next in your own marketing. So those are the 5 pillars of measurement marketing. With all of these workshops, we want to talk about, we'll talk about a lot of different stuff, but the main idea for you is grabbing one idea, especially because this is focused on beginners. And Google Analytics, let's face it, that thing is an overwhelming monster. Typically what happens is people will come into Google Analytics, they have set up their code, they jump into it, they take a look at their user account, they start thinking they're going to ask some questions, but instead of that, they start poking around reports. Pretty quickly, you're like looking at bounce rate and time on page, and you have no idea what the difference between exit pages are and bounce pages. And then you're like, you know what, I'll come back to this in about 4 years. And that's how most people start. That's kind of how we started, because analytics, there's a lot to it. So we're going to cover some of the basic stuff during this workshop, but always make sure to grab one idea, and then you come back, watch the replays. So that's kind of why we've got the Academy back there, so you can watch these on demand anytime you like. We are going to talk about today, without further ado, getting started, how to track leads in Google Analytics using goals. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to pull up our demo site, and I wanted to show this to you, and then I'll show you sort of a real world example of this. But I love the idea of the demo site because it literally strips all the fluff out, right? So we have this demo site set up that really just is there for functionality, so we can mimic what's going on in people's sites and probably what's going on in your site. And when you think about your builds like this, just strip out all the flashy stuff and just get down to what are the core things that I have access to, and how should I set up this goal? It makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to show this to you. So we've created this little dummy post, right? So pretend this is an opt-in page where you're collecting a lead. And we're going to make, in this case, the lead the goal. Now, I've got 2 different yeses that are set up here. Now, pretend these were forms, right? It doesn't really matter. You can say, that they're a form or not. So most are going to operate in the same similar way. So we're going to fill out the form. And then once you fill out the form, in this case, I'm just going to click yes, you go to a thank you page, right? You go to some sort of thank you page that's been set up. And 80% of the time, 85, almost 90% of the time, this is where you are when it comes to this. And if this is where you are, you're going to love this workshop because it's nice and easy, and I'm going to show you some cool tricks. And I'm actually going to start here. And then we're going to come back to some of the more advanced examples where you might have some issues just due to some custom coding or some tools that you're using that might help you to kind of get around this. But I want to the whole purpose of this workshop is goals. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to track leads using Google Analytics goals. And in this case, the first thing I have to figure out is, how do I know a lead happened? Right? And so in this case, in this very sort of stripped down version of an example, when somebody fills out the form and they click on, yay, I want to be a lead. In my example, they go from this page, the can you please join our list, which again is just the URL for the opt-in page, whatever it is, the webinar registration, whatever page it is that you're tracking, to the thank you page. In this case, thank you for joining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into our analytics, and that's what I'm going to set up. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to set up our goals. Now remember, where we do that, we go to admin, we go into our view, and then we click on goals. And you can see actually from there, give me a second. There we go. There's our goals. So we're going to click on new goal, and we're going to create our new leads. Okay, so leads. Now I've got 4 different types of goals that I can play with. 2 of them primarily you'll be using in your measurement marketing. You'll use destination goals and you'll use event goals. The biggest difference, destination goals are all based on URL. So in this case, it's what we're going to use because this is a completely different URL than the other URL. That's how we know that a lead happened. But you could also use, let me go back. We could also use events. Now, again, the difference, destination is everything that's in the URL. Events are specific information that you have to put into Google Analytics. So they do not work on their own. You have to actually set up an event first and make sure that Google Analytics has that information, and then you can fire an event goal based on the information that you put in there. So if that doesn't make sense, there's a tracking engagement workshop that we already have back there in the library. Make sure you watch that, and that'll give you a little more details around setting up events, because those are a really important thing. And with Tag Manager, it's quite a bit easier than it used to be, which is great. So I would recommend that. But for now, we're going to show destination. So we've got new leads, right? So we've got our leads coming in. We've got destination goal, and I'm going to know that it's a new lead because, hey, I've got my thank you for joining page showing up. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to copy this little bit out here. And I'm going to come into Google Analytics, and we're going to set it to destination, click on continue. And then it's going to say, okay, well, how do I know that this happened? How do you want me to actually trigger, right? What's going to trigger this goal to make this goal a fulfillment? So I've got 3 different options. One is it equals to, which is kind of like exact match. Then there's begins with, and then there's regular expression. Now, in the beginning, when you're first starting out, you can use equals to. That really is just copying this out. And the way that I would do it is it sort of would equal to however the pages report in your own analytics. So if your pages report like that, then you would have that page. And so you sort of just do it like that. Begins with is what you would expect. It kind of, okay, must begin with all of this stuff, and then it can have anything else after it. Doesn't matter as long as it begins with this. And then regular expression. Now this is a little more advanced, but kind of a pro tip here from a measurement marketing perspective. If you're going to be doing this at all, it would make sense for you to at least be familiar with regular expression. And that's the one I'm going to use today because I want you to see really kind of the easiest way to implement it. So I'm just going to copy out this thank you for joining. And if I do that, instead of having all this stuff in there, I can just put this in there, and that's it. And regular expression basically tells Google Analytics, in this case, it's telling it, go look for anything that contains this fragment of information, right? Go look for anything that contains this fragment of information. And if it does in the URL, if the URL contains this, then fire the goal, which it does here, right? So we go back to our thank you page URL. I've got this entire URL here, but really, as long as it contains this piece, that's going to fire the goal, which is what we would want. Now, if I wanted to, I could say, well, every lead's worth at least $1, and I could put that in there. And I could also create funnel goals, which is a completely different topic. We actually have a workshop already on setting up funnel goals and the visualization report, so make sure you check those out in the Academy. But the regular expression, thank you for joining, this is all you really need to make sure that you're firing this goal. So I'm actually going to go ahead and save this at this point. And once it's saved, the very next thing we need to do is test it. Okay, so I'm going to go back and we're going to go to real-time reports. And so far, I'm not using Tag Manager at all. This is just using Google Analytics and doing the setup in the back end there. So I'm going to come into our real-time reports, and we're going to go to, first we're going to go to content. And what this is going to do is it shows us, number one, how the data is being stored. So you can see in our case, I've customized this a little bit. We've got measurementmarketing.io showing as the domain because I like seeing the domains up front. And you can see that currently I'm on the can you please join our email list page. Okay, so we're currently on that page. Then if I go to conversions, what you notice here is in conversions, I now have a bunch of different goals, right? These are the ones that were already there. This is the one we just created, this new leads goal. This is how you test your goals. So I'm going to come into new leads, and I'm going to just mimic the fact that I did a lead. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. And now I go, thank you for joining. Okay. Now, what should happen, hopefully, if I go to content, is now I'm on the thank you for joining page, right? So I can see myself on the thank you for joining page. So I know that part's tracking okay, and the page is tracking. But if I go back to conversions, look at that. New leads, 1 active user. That's perfect. So now I know my goal is officially tracking. Now let me show you something because I think this is kind of a cool feature of Google Analytics, but it'll take you by surprise. So especially if you don't know it's there. Now, this is going over the whole concept of testing. So now I'm back on can you please join our email list? Right? I'm going to go back to content in real-time reports just to make sure I'm on that page. And Google Analytics says, yep, I see that you're on this page. And I'm going to do that same thing again. I'm going to go ahead and click on yes, which takes me to thank you for joining. So now I'm on the thank you for joining page. And if I go to content, you see it says, okay, thank you for joining. Now they're on thank you for joining, right? I left the one, I'm on this thank you for joining. So you would think what has happened? I probably just triggered the goal again. However, if you go to conversions, what you'll notice is it still says, you know what, there's just one person that's done this still, not two, just one. And what happens here is it's a functioning of how Google Analytics functions, and it's built to do this. There is no way to change this. And you want this, I think, in a lot of cases. The goals can only be triggered once per session. And remember, session is just a fancy word for visit, right? Once when your user visits the page, that's it, once per page. So in this case, I'm still in the same session, even though I go back to this page and I go back to this other page, I'm still in the same session. And because I've already triggered the goal once, which we see triggered here, it's not going to work. But watch what happens if I close out. Now at this point, I've closed out of my session, right? I'm going to give analytics, a second. So it says active page, and people are going to be going off and it says, okay, it wasn't, thank you for joining. And this eventually will fall off in the next little bit here. And that's because this session is currently closed and I am no longer on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to it. And I'm going to go back into our homepage. Now this is creating a second visit. Okay, so a second visit. You're going to see the homepage show up here in just a moment. With any luck, hopefully, unless it makes me a liar, which it might, because it likes doing that. Oh, yeah, let's go to the right site. There's the main site. I actually want to go to /demo. There we go. Now it's not going to make me a liar. So now we're going to see measure marketing /demo pop up here. Just a minute. There we are. Right there. Boom. So now I'm on demo. I'm on a completely separate visit now. Okay. I'm kind of like on visit number 2. Now, if I go to conversions, you will see, well, hey, in the last active users, which is basically the last 5 minutes, it'll say one person triggered this goal, which is great. But for all intents and purposes, it's a different session, right? Remember, every goal triggers once per session. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to click and I'm going to do that same little fake out. We're going to go, thank you for joining. Now I'm on thank you for joining. So I've just gone through this. And what should happen is I get another trigger. So it comes through. And there we go. Let's see if it shows number 2 there. It should momentarily because it sees us coming across. We're on the thank you for joining page. Let's go. Oh, and it still sees me as the same visitor. I probably should give it more time. There you go. It made me a liar. But I guess my session's not entirely closed yet in Google Analytics. Let me see if I can go back. Oh, there we go. So there's our total goal hits coming through. So I've got another browser that's open on the side here. I've been trying to furiously click. So now I've overachieved my goal. But I've got 4 goal hits in the last 30 minutes. For the active users, which is currently people that are currently on the site, just me, right? Just this one user right now that's showing. So that's why it just shows the 1. But when you're testing, right, it's important to go through and make sure that you're checking all of your hits, making sure your goals are coming through properly. And again, we just did it right now. If I go back to the setup here under destination goals. So I go into goal settings, I'm going to go into our new leads goal, and I'm saying, here's a destination goal. Thank you for joining. Now, here's a question for you. If, let's say this was like for signing up for like a PDF or a checklist or something like that, some kit that you gave away or video course, and it goes to this thank you for joining page. And this is where it says, oh, go ahead and download your stuff here. Well, what if your first email coming back, and this happens a lot of marketers will set this up, where their first email goes to this same thank you page. And it says, hey, if you haven't already, go back here, right, and pick up your gift. Well, if you do that and you're sending, let's say the very first email after I opt in sends me back to this very same page, what will happen is this goal will retrigger again and again and again. And I don't necessarily want that. So I'll give you sort of, again, a little pro tip of how to get around this. If I click back here and I go to this one, see this little another yes that I've set up? Notice in the lower left-hand corner, so when I hover over this, what the URL looks like. It is actually the same URL, except that it's got a little parameter on it called opt-in equals success. And that's something I just made up. All right, so now if I click on that, it says, thank you for joining, opt-in equals success. Okay, so thank you for joining, opt-in equals success. This I just added. This is just me literally making up the word opt-in here and an equals success. It does nothing other than display in the browser. But what I can do when this happens, I basically say, well, if they really came through my form, then I make the form send them back to, opt-in equals success or form equals yes or whatever, right? Some parameter that identifies that it really happened. Because if I send from an email from, Infusionsoft or Aweber or whatever email system I'm using, if I send back from that email to this page, I'm not going to put opt-in equals success on that. I'm not going to add that parameter. And so gives me a differentiator. Now it allows me to see, okay, well, if it's a real lead, then I know it's going to have opt-in equals success. And if it doesn't have opt-in equals success, then it's not going to fire. Now, how do I set that up? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this out. We're going to go to analytics. And I'm a real big believer in good, then better, right? So if this part gets a little confusing in how it works, don't worry about it. Go back and get goals tracking somewhat. Get something that's working. And then you go back and you make it better, right? So get false positives. That's fine. Like get something working. Then you go back and figure out how to filter things out. And of course, if you're an Academy member, you've got access to the Facebook group and our own support that can help you to do that. But how we would do it, right? Or at least one way we would do it is like this. So I would put this in. And because it's regular expression, and again, for those that know regular expressions, you know what I'm talking about. If not, this is just a topic for you to study. And I'll put a link to a really great guide that'll help you with that. So in fact, I think we've got a workshop on that, so we can put that in there. But thank you for joining. So this little question mark means something in regular expression, and we don't want it to mean anything. We just want it to be a question mark. So we do what they call escape it out, which is doing that little symbol there. So we put a little backslash. And all this really means is look for the URL that says, thank you for joining with the question mark, opt-in equals success. That's what it's basically saying. Go find this and this at the end of it. And if that's the case, then go ahead and fire that goal. And now what happens is this goal will now only fire when I hit opt-in equals success, but it will not fire if I do that, right? Or if there was something else, maybe it was like referral equals, something else, right? Whatever, it doesn't matter. If you're coming in from email traffic, you probably you should have, if you're not already, tagging your traffic. So it might say, UTM Source equals Infusionsoft, right? And then whatever else, right, that you've got coming through. So any of this stuff, right, if these pages load with any of these parameters, it won't fire that goal, because that goal is always going to look for if the thank you page contains, go back to the details here, if it contains thank you for joining with this little key, right? This is like your secret code to Google Analytics to say fire the goal, but otherwise don't fire the goal. So there's one way that you can go about setting up leads. Actually, there's now two ways. One is the generics to sort of grab it and get it tracking. The second way is, I think, a little bit better. But again, if you're not ready for it, that's fine. At least get started and then go back and make it better when you're ready. But if you use regular expressions, you can start using those to start putting these little key parameters in there that are like little permissions, right? So yes, you have permission to fire because it says opt-in equals success. It'll only say opt-in equals success if my thank you page contains a certain thing. And I only would know that because it came from the form. So there's sort of the second way. And I'm going to show you a real world. Let's see, I think we've got, I thought I had, let me see. I got to figure out where I put it. There we go. So we have a traffic tracker form here. And I'll show you kind of what we do. Again, pro tip, this little plus test, if you're using any sort of Google Apps or Gmail, use that. Anything you do plus, and then this is all ignored. So in this case, I do plus test because I can filter that stuff out. It makes me easy to find when I'm trying to delete out accounts, all that sort of stuff. So super useful little tip. I'm going to go ahead and fake opt-in, actually technically really opting in this case. And then once it goes to my thank you page, which it looks like it's camera shy on right now, of course, only happens when I'm doing these live. There we go. So now I'm on TY, download traffic tracker, right? So I could have set it up like that. But what we did is, because in this case, this is very specific to us, and in those of you who maybe use Infusionsoft, but because we use Infusionsoft, we have Infusionsoft pass back contact details. So here I've got the entire thing that I tell it to do in our goal is TY for thank you pages, download traffic tracker, question mark, contact ID equals. That's our goal. Because the contact ID is going to be different every time somebody comes into our system. But this phrase is what it's looking for, this little fragment of information. So what we tell it is, hey, go, only when it contains contact ID equals. Then if I send them back from an email and I say, hey, make sure you download your traffic tracker, right? Congratulations, go download your traffic tracker. I can send them directly to this page, only this time, all of this stuff ends up saying something that looks like this, _source equals Infusionsoft, right? And then a bunch of other parameters. So, but now the page looks like that with underscore equals, UTM underscore equals source and, or underscore source equals, if I could say that right. There we go. But this phrase is completely different than what the goal set up for. So that's a real world example of how we're doing this. So that's what I think is a super important way of practicing this. Now, the other couple of ways that I'll mention, and these are a little more advanced, so we're not going to cover them in intricate detail here, but to let you know what's possible is you could start firing events. And so what you can do, and I'm going to click on preview here, you should be using Tag Manager. If you are not, please do everything in your power to get Tag Manager on your pages and start using it because it is an amazing tool. It will make your life 1,000 times easier. I'm going to go back into our demo site here and we're going to refresh with our preview mode. So now I'm going to go into our opt-in form and then I'm going to go ahead and do this regular yes here. Okay. So I'm going to do this. So now I've triggered my goal, thank you for joining. Now, if I look into my variable section, in Tag Manager, what I see here, what it'll tell me is the page I'm currently on, which is the page URL. So there's my variable for page URL. But what it also tells me is the page I was just on, which is, in this case, our fake little opt-in, right? Can you please join our email list? So I could fire an event in Google Tag Manager that says when they are on this page, right? When page URL equals this and refer equals this, right? And the page they were just on was the opt-in form. Then and only then fire this event. And then that event is what I would set up as an event goal in Google Analytics. Well, that, again, virtually eliminates the false positives because the only way you would go from an opt-in to the thank you page in the same little visit, right, where it's stitched together like that, step 1, step 2, is if you actually opted in, right? So in that case, it would work perfectly fine. And if I came back from an email, even to the same thank you page, it would not have the opt-in as its referrer. It would be technically probably no referrer in that example. So it would not fire the event, and therefore it would work just fine. Now, the other thing to take a look at would be in forms, I think like Contact Form 7 in WordPress and other forms that you'll have that maybe your dev team built out. You'll have Ajax forms, which are annoying for measurement marketers, to be completely honest. So, but let me see if I can get Traffic Tracker pulled up. And I don't have one of these. Because they're annoying, but imagine if this just included download now, you clicked on it, and then this just sort of refreshed itself, and it said, thanks, your thing is on the way, right? And so what happens is in that case, the URL doesn't actually change, but the form changes and says, yeah, okay, you've been submitted, but the URL doesn't change. So how do you track that stuff? And again, that's going to be through events. You really don't have a choice in that example. It has to be on the event. And so there are different levels, again, good than better, right? So pick your level at whatever your skill set currently is. The good level is saying in Tag Manager, when I'm on the opt-in page and I click on the button to submit, then go ahead and fire it. Now, yes, will you get false positives? Sure. But most people are not clicking on buttons randomly, right? They're clicking on after they want to submit. People at this point mostly know how to use the internet. So you will get some false positives, but I still think you'll get something more useful than no data at all. So it's something to go for. The second option or the better option is requiring a little more coding, right? So in Tag Manager, there's history listeners where you can see if the browser's changed. And you can call what they say, scrape the DOM to see if the browser has changed at all. And then when the browser's changed and that form is basically submitted its thing, then you can go ahead and fire the event. And if you've got developer support or if you're building it on your own and you've got the ability, the ultimate way of doing it is putting information in the data layer. And again, if all of this stuff right now, you're just starting out, sounds like Greek, no problem. Like, don't even worry about that. Go back to destination goals and get those started. But I want to make sure that everyone understands there's different levels of measurement marketing of these skills. And as your own skills grow, you will be doing this different ways. But it is not something that you should wait and do it the very best possible way ever because you'll never get it done. And then eventually you'll just end up leaving this again because you're like, I can't even get information. So start with something, even if it's just a basic destination goal, something like that, right? Start with something, get it working, and then go back and make it better. You will, I promise you, make it a lot further in your measurements and in your tracking setups when you do that. All right, so I am going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A here. I'm going to pop into the Facebook group, and then also I'll be taking a look at the members area. So anybody in the members area in the Backend Academy will be able to get their answers. Hopefully you got at least one thing from this. Remember, there are different ways to do this when it comes to goals. So you've got destination goals. You can do destination goals with parameters. You can fire event goals from Google Tag Manager. You can trigger the events based on refers, which is kind of an often overlooked technique, but incredibly powerful. So if they're on the opt-in thank you page and they were just on my opt-in page, then I will fire it. Then you've got the ability to do it through kind of what they call scraping the DOM in the back end when if you got Ajax forms and you need something like that done, or you can also ultimately put it into the data layer, which is the very, very best way of doing it, especially if you're working from a developer standpoint. So if you've got a development team, do that. I would always recommend the data layer. All right, so at least one of those should be your one thing. The Measurement Marketing Academy, if you are not a member already, definitely encourage you to do that. You'll see a place to upgrade in the area of the Academy where you're watching Workshop Wednesday. It is where we have all of the workshops. You've got unlimited access to everything. We've got the Measurement Marketing wins that are going back there. In fact, those are coming out next week. So I saw some final versions coming through today, or actually yesterday. I saw them coming in from our team. So by the end of this week, we should be totally cooked in our measurement win. Everybody else will be seeing that stuff. So it should be really entertaining. And of course, support in the Facebook group and tons of other stuff that's back there. But go ahead and take a look at Measurement Marketing Academy. And we are now moving into open Q&A. So let's see. I'm going to jump into any questions that are in either the Facebook group or if you are watching live in the Members Academy in there. So those are the two places I'm going to look. All right. So Boyd is asking, okay, now some more measurement marketing related, which is totally cool. Like this is an open forum at this point. It's open Q&A. So Boyd's asking, in place of storing the IP, is it possible to store the location data for the IP? So this is, Boyd, I'm going to ask, this is related to like GDPR stuff in terms of storing IP. And the reason I ask is because Google Analytics technically doesn't give you access to the IP addresses. So you're theoretically storing them, but you don't really have access to them as a controller of data. So Google Analytics has them as a processor of data, but it doesn't give you access to them as a controller of data for that. So when it comes to IP addresses, that's sort of how GA works. And again, GA does technically store them because you can use them you can filter out by IP address and things like that. And that never used to be a problem until GDPR, when the European Union basically declared IP addresses were also essentially PII. Now, again, to Google, they're not PII, but to Europe, they are. So, or the European Union. So the IP addresses have become an issue as of late. So I think if you're in the States, probably not that big a deal to kind of keep on keeping on. You will automatically, that's partially how Google already stores location as far as where people live, right? And where your visitors are and all that sort of stuff. It's getting it from IP addresses. So it's already translating that, if that makes sense. And then the option, if you wanted to get rid of IP addresses and not store them, so to speak, or even have GA be able to store them, is to anonymize them. There are a couple of ways to do that. One in Tag Manager, which we actually showed last week in the Workshop Wednesday update. So you can go back there and take a look at that. And then the other one, because it's a really simple setting. And then the other one is just a hard-coded GA line. And actually, if you look in the Facebook group, Steen has a comment where he was just talking about doing exactly that. And that will anonymize your IP addresses. So even though there will be IP addresses, they'll be sort of generic to Google, and it won't be considered PII to Europe anymore, to the European Union. So if that's a concern. But remember, when you anonymize IP addresses, your location data will not be as useful. So I think you would know things like they were in the state of Texas, but it may not necessarily get my city right, something like that. Let's see. So Jan was asking, isn't this two goals? Thank you, contact us, and thank you, contact us. UTM source equals success. So let me go back here, Jan. So if we're talking about the goals, so thank you, contact us. So if I'm just going to type in your example here. So thank you - contact us. So that is a totally legitimate goal, right? And will trigger anytime this fragment comes in to Google Analytics. That'll trigger the goal. Okay, again, once per session. At least it'll record once per session. Then let's see. The next one you had, thank you, contact us, UTM source equals success, is a technically, if I do it like this, like you did, I'm copying and pasting exactly what you did from the chat here. Yes, it is a completely different goal. So you could set this up. Now, if you had both goals set up, right? If you had both goals set up, when somebody came to this page, both goals would fire. And that's because the first goal is told to fire whenever this happens, which it still does here. And the second goal is saying, yeah, but also make sure this is the same, right? And just an FYI, I'm probably just doing this as an example, but you would never use success as your UTM source, right? Just make up some other parameter. So like, lead equals success. You could just do L equals success, something like that. But UTM source, you always want to make the branded source of your traffic, whatever it is. But yeah, to your point, like this, it's a completely different goal. So you would need to, if you set up, I would technically probably just do this version of it. This is like the easiest, because destination goals are the easiest goals to set up for tracking leads. They are the easiest by far. Events, depending upon the level, can be a little harder. But in Google Analytics, when you're setting up your goals for leads, I would try to do it like this. This is my preferred method, is I do the thank you page, and then I'll do a little parameter that gives me a little secret code that only will show up if they're coming in from my form. Right. And because that just works for us, because in Fusionsoft, I can just say, hey, redirect and put on this parameter. So hope that helps. And if not, obviously ask away. And then Ryan's asking, so how do you QA a live page to find out if a goal is working instead of being the only person on the page? Oh, easy. So it's not being the only person. Well, so it's kind of being the only person. The only way for you to actually realistically know if something is working in Google Analytics is to see it record in Google Analytics. There are lots of ways to sort of see what happens up until that point. Like if you were firing an event from Google Tag Manager and you can see the event fire from GTM, but you may not actually see it record properly in Analytics. So I always like to see it in Analytics. So really the only way to properly test is in this conversions area, right? But what if you're in a high traffic site? Like it's easy for me right now. I'm the only person on the site. I don't get lost. But there's lots of stuff, right? Lots of clients we work with where they've got, a ton of hits, and it's really hard because this only shows like the top, 20, actually this would be, top little 20 pages or something like that. And then it sort of blurs. So what you do is you UTM yourself when you're doing it. So I would come in here and I would say, measurement marketing /demo. And then I would do UTM source equals test. Technically, the way that we actually do this in RealWorld is we'll do test, and then sometimes we'll do campaign equals test too. So because we need all three of those. And depending upon what we're testing, especially if we're doing a lot of tests that day, we'll do like UTM term equals, and then maybe put in the date digit. So in this case, it would be May 9th. And then under the content, we'll put in the details of whatever the test is. So content testing lead, right? Something like that. And if we're doing like funnel tracking and we're trying to track different upsells and downsells, then we'll do it like that, or webinar registration or whatever. And so what happens is we always have our same source of traffic, which is test, source, medium, test, which makes it easy to segment out that stuff, or just to segment that so we can see it. And then I can say, well, yeah, what was that one day that we tested the upsell and did that upsell report properly in e-commerce? And I would be able to see that because in the content I would say bought core, declined first upsell, accepted second upsell, or something like that I would put in there so that we could see what was going on. So that's how we would do that. And when you do this, then you would come into analytics and you'll see under traffic sources, there's that test showing, right? So if I click here in real-time reports, now I'm filtering everything in my real-time reports. Like any of you right now could go to measurementmarketing.io/demo, right? Any of you can go to that site. None of you will show up on my real-time right now, unless you do UTM test. That's the only time you'll show up. Because this is now filtering just for anything technically where the medium is test. So that's it. So now it shows me, and as I go through the different pages, it'll show just me and the pages that I am currently on. And this is another way for tracking, like cross-domain tracking, things like that. But as I go through the different pages, it'll say, okay, now he's on this page and it was associated to this traffic source. So that's how that whole thing is, it works. And that's what I would do. We just do, test and then go from there. So, all right. So next up, do a real quick review of Facebook. I think I got that in place. Ryan, I see your comment. Okay, same comment, Facebook. Perfect. So hopefully that answers that, but let me know. I mean, UTMs is how we do it. It's the easiest possible way. to do that. It's just UTMing yourself. I know Steve had the question earlier this morning about the anonymization. So and I'll write this to you, Steen, just in case you don't see this workshop. But Steen was saying, hey, why not just set up IP anonymization anyway? Like, there's no point because you can't access them. So remember, in Google Analytics, your location data, right, is based on IP address. So if you anonymize your IP addresses, your location data will not be as specific. If that does not matter, then I would agree with you. I don't think it's going to harm you all that much. If you are breaking down segments by city for retargeting purposes, then it might. So, if you happen to be something like that set up. So just a couple of things to consider when it comes to that. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? And again, let me know if any follow-up questions that anybody has on that as well. I'm going to do one quick spin through, make sure we get all the Q&As. All right. So thank you, Boy, Jan, and Ryan for those questions. I think that is it. All right. So then we will go ahead and finish it up here. I'll give it another few more seconds in the meantime. So any questions that come in, if you're watching on the replay, pop them in the Facebook group. That's the best place for them. And I'll go ahead and answer them there so that you can get it. Just make sure you ping me if you'd be so kind, because that way I'm one of those rare birds that does not go into Facebook unless kicking and screaming. I've been dragged into it, which is not to say that you guys are kicking and screaming, get me kicking, screaming, dragging into it, but that's what the tagging does. So tag me in there so I can be alerted to it. Because I love helping you guys out. I love getting into the groups, and I will go into the groups and then I will leave the groups, but I do not browse Facebook. So unless I'm tagged, it's tough. And then we've got our team members actually know that too. So they're always around behind me, kind of making sure that if somebody has tagged me, that I jump in there. So definitely do that. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns popping up? I don't see anything. Ryan saying, makes sense. Thanks. It'd be a nice refresher to see the setup from the event from the refer. Yeah, I can do that right now. Let's do that. So just as a refresher, again, I'm going to go fast through this because there are workshops that cover the details. But for those that are already kind of familiar and want to see what I'm talking about. So the way that I would do this is I'm going to go back into here. Oh, no, never mind. That's what I wanted. So I'm going to go back here, right? So it's like, thank you for joining, right? And the variables at my page view are page URL is the page itself, in this case with a little parameter, but I don't have to have that. And then this is the refer, right? So in fact, I am going to do this. I'm going to copy it all out with the parameter. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go in the tag manager. We're going to create a trigger because it's all about the trigger, right? All about the trigger in this case. So when, which is again, tag manager, when do I want you to do what I'm asking you to do? So we're going to do a trigger. I'm going to do a page view trigger, and I'm going to say only on some page views when these two things are true, right? Remember, I'm going to set up two different conditions. So two things have to be true. One is related to the page URL. The other is related to the refer. So when the page URL contains, and I'm going to pop in this. Now, when you copy and paste just like I did, remember to check this stuff because you will get caught by that. There are extra little spaces that pop up in there. Sometimes other miscellaneous stuff you don't necessarily want or need, which in this case is this. So when the page, and I'm going to keep it really easy. So I'm going to take all this stuff out here. So when it contains this, okay. Now remember, I'm using contains so I can keep the question mark in there. So a little pro tip again, that's a kind of a GTM specific thing. That's nice. So if it contains, you don't need this. If I did regex, where I said matches regex, I would need to escape out that. So just a little, but I like using contains. If I ever could, this is what I would love to keep it at. So it keeps it nice and easy. And it's not just for me, it's for other people back here reading stuff. So I try to make sure things are transferable, right? So thank you for joining Opt-in equals success. That's the page they have to be on. And the refer is this. So I'm going to copy this out. Right click copy, go back to tag manager. When the refer contains, look for my little space, which there always is one. There we go. So take that out. So now it's when it contains, I'm just going to delete all this extra stuff because I don't really need it. So when it contains the fragment, can you please join our list? So when the refer, which is the page they were just on, contains this, and the page they are currently on contains this, in this case with this specific parameter, then fire. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. This is going to be page view and then new lead, right? So we'll save it. Then I've got my trigger all set up. I'm going to go to tags and I'll just create an event tag. Actually, what I'm going to do is copy an event tag. So I got all the stuff already set up in there. So this is going to be, it's category leads. Let's say action is going to be the page URL. That's the URL they're currently on. So I can keep that there. And then, you know what? Let's just put in refer, because that'll tell me automatically, using variables here, that'll tell me what page they were previously on. So now I know what page they were, what opt-in page they were on when they completed their goal. So, and then I'm going to keep everything else the same here. And I'm going to edit this. We're going to take off this trigger, and I'm going to use this trigger, which is the one we just created, right? Which, remember, is when they are on this page and they were just on that page. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this. So this is a GA event. In this case, new lead. Save it. Now I'm going to preview, refresh my preview. And I'm going to go back here, which will automatically refresh my preview. So now if I go down, it shows there's my new lead tag. And it's going to tell me, hey, at the page view, new lead did not happen. Here's why it didn't happen. Because the page URL was not, thank you for joining, and the referral was not our email list. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. And if I look at our page view when this fired, you can see it's saying, yep, both things worked. So thank you for joining happened, and this is the parameter. And then can you please join our email list was the referrer. So that's why this tag fired. And here's the information that got fired. So leads, action label. And if I go into analytics, which remember, this is really the only way to truly, truly know, go into your events and you see it. Because I know that Tag Manager threw the ball, right? I knew it delivered the package, but I really do not know that analytics caught it properly, or that it came in the way I thought it was going to come in. Sometimes you make up an idea of like, oh, this is going to be a perfect little structure. And then you see it and you're like, it doesn't work at all. So you have to change it. So in this case, it's, category of leads. And then I've got, here's my event action, which is the page they were on that actually caused the goal to happen. So I can see, oh, these are my different goals coming in. And then this is the page they were just on before that. And that's just coming in through a variable. So hopefully that works. Little refresher for you. Because again, these workshops are perfect for that. So thank you again for asking that, Ryan. All right. I'm going to take a real quick spin one more time. So Tim, how are you, sir? Been a while, man. Good to see you as always. I bet you're going through a ton of GDPR being in Germany. So that's got to be fun. I would love to hear your stories about that in the Facebook group, actually, to see kind of what you guys are doing. Because you're in ground zero, so to speak, out there. All right, so I think that's it. I'm going to take one more spin through comments in the chat room and on the Facebook group. And I do, a few minutes later, I'll take another look at questions just in case. Sometimes Facebook doesn't quite real time the way that I want it to with these comments, but hopefully it will. And I'm not seeing comments. Okay, Ryan saying, love it. Thanks, Mercer. Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. So I think we are good. Say you bet. All right, cool. At least it'll keep you busy for a while. All right. Well, that is it, man. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Again, any questions that come in as you're watching this on a replay, you think about a question later, Facebook group. That's where everything is. And this is it's a awesome technique to be able to get goals set up in Google Analytics. And I'm going to cover just one quick little outro here when it comes to goals, because you might think, okay, well, why should I even do that? It's because it opens up all these other reports to you in Google Analytics. You have this whole goal report section that you need. So that's what it's all about, right? So make sure that you use that and play with goals and set up goals and practice goals. You can use them for leads. You can use them for key page views. In this case, I wanted to show leads specifically because there's so many different use cases for leads where you can use parameters, you can use events, and you can use refers and page URLs. And it's helpful to not think about setting up goals one way, because there isn't just one way you can do this stuff. There's always multiple ways you can do this stuff. It is the best, worst thing about this is there's multiple ways to do things. But doing that, when you have multiple ways to achieve the same goal, it empowers you. And then you rarely run into a situation where you can't handle it, right? So that's what this is all about. All right. So with that, thanks again. I appreciate everyone's time, effort, and energy. Thank you again for watching this workshop. This has been Getting Started, How to Track Leads in Google Analytics Using Goals. Thanks again for watching the workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.